Welcome to the HL7 Da Vinci Community Roundtable. Today's session is about significant progress, HL7's Da Vinci Project Year, End Review, and 2023 plans. My name is Alex Goss, and it is my pleasure to moderate today's presentation and to remind all of us that we engage in these forums under HL7 antitrust policies to ensure appropriate collaboration and information sharing. We thank you for your patience while we get started. We were having a bit of a technical issue and we may need to do a technical checkout on a video as we get further into the presentation. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. And first, let me express my gratitude for your participation in the November Community Roundtable, Da Vinci's educational webinar. Today's session is a combined event of the Da Vinci Project Member Forum and Industry-Wide Community Roundtable. We've combined these two meetings to deliver this year's program accomplishments. Today's presentation starts with Jocelyn Keegan providing a year-end review, as well as a preview of the project goals and activities planned for 2023, including membership expansion. The webinar continues with a panel of industry and HL7 Da Vinci project leaders sharing the impact of corresponding regulations and the proven guides that reduce burden and enable efficient value-based care workflows. In particular, they'll discuss the reality and progress of the Da Vinci implementations in a world where FHIR APIs are becoming the de facto norm for data sharing for clinical data exchange and prior authorization. Jocelyn Keegan, our program manager, will moderate the panel discussion with Kirk Anderson, the chair of the Da Vinci Project Steering Committee and Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Cambia Health Solutions. Derek DeYoung, the Director of Research and Development, is graciously stepping in today for Ryan from Epic. Derek is of the programmer type and is in development with the payer platform at Epic. Hans, we all know Hans, and we're grateful for his role as the Vice Chair on the Steering Committee and the Director of Interoperability Strategy at Cerner. So in addition to Kirk and Derek and Hans, Jocelyn, as you know, is our program manager and payer practice lead at Point of Care Partners. And our panelists are rounded out with Anna Taylor, the HL7 Da Vinci Project Steering Committee member and Assistant Vice President of Population Health and Value-Based Care at Multicare Connected. We're grateful for their leadership and their time today. And let me go through a few housekeeping items before we turn it over for the year-end review. If you have any questions, we really encourage you to submit those through the question box throughout the event. We will be taking questions after the panelist presentation today. Time permitting, we'll also do a check-in with Jocelyn after her year-end review. If you have any audio issues, please go ahead and try using the number that was provided in your dial-in information or leaving and coming back in, as that can often resolve the issues. We appreciate everyone's support in completing the survey. As you know, we take that seriously and factor it into future programming. Speaking of, for future programming, we will resume in the new year. Our next meeting is slated for January 25th, 2023, as we intend to continue our fourth Wednesdays at 4 p.m. as our regular cadence. Please stay tuned to the calendar for registration details for future events. Speaking of events, we have the HL7 FHIR Connectathon and Working Group meeting being held January 14th through the 20th. Both events are at the Hilton Hotel Lake Las Vegas Resort and Spa in Henderson, Nevada, just 15 miles from the Las Vegas airport. We encourage you to get in your registration early as it closes for early bird registration December 16th. And we also would like to encourage those of you who are planning to participate in the January Connectathon to consider adding member attribution to your testing scope. Da Vinci Project is actively seeking participants to test member attribution. And if you want more details, please check out our Connectathon page. The link is included in the slides, which will be posted along with the recording tomorrow morning. In regards to news, a couple updates here from the last webinar. If you were in attendance, you heard us speak about the RFI for the advanced EOB and good faith estimates. Da Vinci has provided a response through our membership collaboration, and we've posted that on our resource page. We are currently, as the Da Vinci community, collaborating with our fellow accelerators in addressing the National Directory of Healthcare request for information. We are working towards the December 6th, 2022 submission requirement date. HL7 is providing a response, as well as I know FAST will be providing one, and we'll be factoring in all of the HL7 community feedback in the HL7 formal response process. Hot off the news, there's a new proposed rule out there for all of us to take a look at for confidentiality of substance use disorder for patient records. This is affectionately referred to as Part 2, updates that are being floated by industry for their feedback on health information privacy focus areas related to patient consent and redisclosure of Part 2 records, new rights to obtain an accounting of disclosures, greater restrictions against the use and disclosures of records in civil, criminal, administrative, and legislative proceedings, some new penalty considerations for violations, and enforcement authority are some of the areas included in that NPRM. And we're anticipating it to be released this Friday, December 2nd, with the usual 60-day comment period. Finally, I would like to make sure that you're all aware that we are accepting nominations for the 2022 champions. We have an award process for recognizing those individuals who display industry above self, a passion for making the healthcare system work better, a commitment to growing others and promoting change. You can see the award, and you can also see on the other side of the screen the very brief form that we ask you to complete for your candidate submissions, and we would like to receive those within the next month. With that speedy overview, apologize for the technical issues. Jocelyn Keegan, I'd like to invite you on screen.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And once again, we can be assured there is never a dull moment. And I am so thankful for my colleagues that are nothing if not flexible when dealing with this wonderful world of technology we get to work with each day. So just to, I guess maybe sort of big picture, you know, in the past couple of years, we've done sort of a tick and tie of numbers of things that we've progressed and number of participants and number of presentations. We've really moved into, I think, really a operate, implement mode from a program perspective. And so we took a little bit of a lens pullback to do this year's year-end update. For those of you that are members, you'll get your summary year-end update that has all the numbers and the financials and the accomplishments in more detail. But I think the proof is in the pudding for those of you that are out in the community, both in the work and the progress that we're seeing made. Alex, if you can go to the next slide. I want to always just take a minute to recognize the people that make up Da Vinci from a funding and from a membership perspective, because I think that this work at its very core is human powered. You guys have heard me say that for the last 5 years, but it's remarkable. And I think a theme that comes into and across everything that we're doing is this concept of community. We are literally building community while doing this work. You know, people that are fiercely competitive are literally rolling up their sleeves, working side by side, trying to figure out how do we get to table stakes to really support our value-based care, our community that's entering into more and more at-risk contracts, and the tools to reduce burden, you know, not just from our provider partners, but really everyone across the spectrum, including their payer counterparts, so that we can get to the promise of really spending time on the patients that need care and the interruption, you know, the interrupts into workflow to get to those events and those activities where we're going to be able to proactively impact change, as opposed to, you know, often the retrospective world that we live in. I do a couple call outs. First, super excited. You can see it's just a temporary logo right now. Meditech has actually signed their SOU, and will be a 2023 member. I'm going to take some time today to actually talk to the wider community. We made a number of updates to the membership model over this year with feedback from members, and really with this idea of advancing the program as it becomes more and more widely adopted, candidly to share the costs of the project more widely across the organizations that are going to be leveraging these standards in the coming years. So that's really the main point I want to get across here. But again, you know, we continue to add more payers, providers, and in the underlying partners that, you know, you guys all use to be able to get this work done. Can you flip to the next slide? Thanks. And again, in the spirit of not trying to just do lists of numbers, I really wanted to share the details about the progress that we've made this year. And so you can see this was our roadmap that we set out to start in 2022. And we have progressed the vast majority of our guides across balloting and ballot reconciliation and publication throughout this year. I'm actually really excited for a couple of highlights. I think probably mostly progress that we've made in the rewrite of our CDEX guide over the last year or so. We've actually balloted CDEX 3 times over the last year and a half. And as you can see under that September ballot item, we haven't yet gotten to publish, but we've got, sort of, I'd say, nose to the grindstone, working to get to ballot reconciliation and to publish with that. And in addition, you can see we had publications for formulary and updates to that guide now that it's been out and more widely adopted, and final STU1 updates across a number of the foundational guides, like PlanNet and the underlying components health record exchange, which is really the underlying sort of shared resource that cuts across many of our guides. And we continue to invest in some of our new nascent guides. So we had risk adjustment have its first publication this year. We're really excited to have people come and test at Connectathon this year in January. Beginning of next year in January. And are really on track to get to an STU2 with risk adjustment. We really learned a lot in our DEQM work that we brought into the risk adjustment world, which has been fantastic and had really great feedback and adoption, but looking to get more people to get hands-on there. And then we're barreling down on publication across a series of other guides. You'll see our CRD guides, the prior auth CRD, DTR, and PAS guides sort of in order, sort of coming to completion for their STU 1.1, which is an update. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And then getting to publication with our first STU on patient cost transparency and an STU2 for payer data exchange. We were really successful in getting a wide adoption of that last year. And actually, Alex, why don't you use that as a segue and go to the next slide? We're at really over a 1-year mark with patient access APIs being live in production and utilization increasing for the payers that have rolled that out as a Da Vinci API and many vendors, including that as sort of base technology. And I think that's an important milestone to think about, is the fact that there are now a subset of payers that chose to pick up the Da Vinci IGs ahead of them being required by CMS for patient access API, but that we now have that base foundation. And then coupled with that, I think one of the other milestones, and we'll dig into this in the discussion today, is that by the end of the year, it's not just that EHRs will have FHIR APIs, we'll have everybody with FHIR APIs at US CDI 3 or US Core 1, right? So it won't be the world that we need them to be at for, sort of some of the functionality we need for some of our guides, but we're starting to, again, get those foundational assets in place across the industry. We're seeing live implementations and development, testing, roadmap mentions across the board for vendors, payers, and providers about how Da Vinci is the way that they're going to get work done. Super excited to have both Kirk and Anna on the phone today. They've worked with MCG and a number of other vendors to really get to that first milestone of a public announcement of their production. Not everybody's gotten to announcing, but there's a lot of activity out there in the industry. But really this idea of last year they brought DEQM live, and this year they're on top of that, they're now doing a pure FHIR implementation using the Da Vinci exception for prior authorization, which is exciting. And I'm sure they'll be more than happy to share some of the early findings from that project. And as I mentioned on the last screen, getting to that first ballot with those new use cases we kicked off last year, PCT and risk adjustment, and then not included on the roadmap for last year, but super excited about the traction we've gotten. We kicked off discovery about mid-year on a new use case called value-based performance reporting. And if you haven't yet seen that, IG and the work around it, I would ask folks to check it out. It's we did a presentation on it at kickoff in the September community roundtable that's recorded, and the not only it's really the culmination, I would say, sort of the time span that we've been able to kick off these IGs and get them quickly to that first publication is, I think we've really refined this process of how we're working with industry, both with the membership and the wider public community, to really have a defined process of going through discovery, really refining what the purpose of the guide is, and then being able to understand how to get through the FHIR gap analysis and all of the work to get to the ability to be able to get that first ballot underway. And so value-based performance is kicked off in September, and just I would say the volume of folks that have come to that use case, really understanding how it's overarching going to allow us to tie together. I think it's almost like a nice little bow on top of many of the APIs that we've developed to date for allowing payers and providers to really monitor in more real time their progress around their contractual goals that they have in their shared contracts. So again, super excited about that work. And that is all happening across a backdrop of industry work and policy implications for the work that we're doing. So as you heard Alex talk about, in addition to the tri-agency RFI, we also submitted an RFI response to ONC's EPA RFI earlier this spring. Sorry, I'm going to say that word as many times as possible. And so I think, again, this is a really good example of how the community itself is coming together to reinforce the need for standards. And I would maybe just add a little bit of commentary that even as we're reviewing the other RFI comments that are coming in around the work and the mention of Da Vinci APIs in these RFIs is the resounding sound that's coming out of them isn't, no, don't do this. It's, we need time. We need the ability to pilot. We need support in expanding the base. So, I think people understand we're moving in the right direction, and really, how can our colleagues on the ONC and CMS side help provide alignment and impetuous for those folks that haven't sort of joined this conversation and started doing this work early. In addition to that, I don't think we've talked about this publicly, but, I go through and read all the RFI responses because I'm the program manager and I can't stop myself. And I was looking at the CMS quality RFI they did earlier this year, and I'm always so surprised at the work that we put out there in the industry, how many people are independently referencing and drawing attention to our FHIR development work when responding, not just to the public RFIs that are coming out of the federal government, but also in industry conversations about pointing to Da Vinci as the way to do this work. So that's exciting. And again, this idea that we've moved from sort of this build phase over the last 2 or 3 years to really coming out of the pandemic and moving into, I would say, pure implementation operate mode with a lot of these guides and getting real world feedback. And I know there's a lot of bated breath out there in the industry right now that we are waiting for what was the rule that was pulled back in 2020, which is affectionately being referred to, I don't know what it will finally be called, but Interop 3. It's at OMB. It's been sitting at OMB. I think there's many of us that are fearful of what our Christmas holidays are going to look like. I'm fingers crossed, thankful to have gotten through Thanksgiving without a NPRM dropping. But really, that is we are anticipating to and listening to the conversation that's coming out of our colleagues at CMS, anticipating that we're going to see a refresh and in a larger expanse, including the MA plans in that rule, which touches not just on prior authorization, but also in the previous incarnation formally named the specific Da Vinci IGs, not just for use with consumer applications, but also with payers being obligated to share those same APIs with their provider partners. And the current description also references hospitals and other provider systems, that are under CMS's purview. So some exciting implications there for us, I think, around getting both sides of the puzzle involved there. And I'd also note that there's an attachments rule. And I think that as we were doing our planning for 2023, I think one of the things that really resonated and I think sort of made us all pause as we thought about the impact of our work and where we were headed in 2023 was that really across the work that we're doing, how much activity there's also happening on the regulatory front that can leverage the investment that all of us have, as a community, have made in building these guides over the previous 5 years. And, you know, like usual, we've been out there in the market talking, demonstrating. I'm so thankful for everyone that takes time out of their busy schedules to go out and evangelize and educate people about the work and tell their stories, because I think that the realness in which the Da Vinci teams have been, I think, so open and honest about what it's taken to get their projects underway in the industry, I think has really helped other folks sort of garner support and make progress. And I'm thankful to all the organizations that give us stage time and invite us to come and give them that and give us, you know, basically airtime on their platforms to be able to talk about the work and the progress that we're making. I guess my only takeaway here that I would say to you guys, to all of you, is, you know, while this is all very good, we don't by any means want to be Pollyanna-ish. We understand that while we're making material progress, that many of you are in situations where until there is a regulatory action or until there's a more direct sign that regulation is coming, that you're not going to get the resources or the time from your teams to be able to get work underway. But we hope that you're at least participating as much as you can in the community to make sure that you're aligned with and we're getting your feedback in the process. With that, can you flip to the next slide? Just because it wouldn't be a Da Vinci PMO update without looking at our dashboard of progress. You know, we continue to be excited when we get to move the dials up and flip the maturity around some of these guides forward. I think the main key points that I want to make here is there are a few places we're going to make some increased investment. If you can do a double click for me, or another click through, Alex. So as we look at 2023, you know, we're going to, all of the things we just talked about, we're going to keep doing, right? We're going to keep evangelizing. We're going to keep maturing all the IGs that are in flight out of the survey work that we did. And if you didn't see last month's update, I would recommend you take the hour to go and listen to it. There's some really good, valuable visuals around what we got from survey results for our members about where their priorities are going in the next year. Is we've made the decision to continue to invest in PCT and start to expand some of the aspects of those workflows that weren't covered in our initial guides. So if you're not coming to those calls, or if you pause going to them, get back involved. We're going to be going sort of back into research about what the next phase is once we get beyond publication. And then clinical data exchange. I'm actually really excited about the progress here and some of the solutioning that we're doing based on feedback from the market to be able to include questionnaire as part of the criteria. But we'll be investing this year in example sets and exemplars about if you were going to use CDEX for this specific business problem. So we're really looking for people from your business side who are doing clinical data exchange today or dealing with some of the challenges of not having codified or resource-based clinical data exchange today to come and get involved in the project. And then lastly, remittance advice. That's one of our use cases that's come up of a potential way to get around some limitations in the existing X12 transaction set of only one person being able to get remittance advice as we get more and more commingled claims. And so we've had a member and a provider, a payer, and one of our EHR members come through and start thinking about what would be a FHIR solution to augment the existing X12 transactions for remittance advice. So that'll come to you guys once we go through discovery here from a Da Vinci perspective. And with that, if you can flip forward, I'm just going to take 2 seconds. It'll be a little bit longer than that, just to talk about membership, because at the end of the day, we are a project that is funded by membership dollars. And I think that we have proven, and the industry has proven over the last 5 years, that the pairing of paid resources to actually write the IGs, develop the reference implementations, organize and structure the work and set the milestones has paid off, right? I think everybody's happy with their investment and the work that we've done, but the number of use cases has increased. I think we've taken a little bit of a shift and the project has grown. You know, we started with 25 members. We now have over 50 members. So we're continuing the path to try and figure out what does the project look like as a larger organization. And so one of the things we were able to do is actually lower the price tag for Da Vinci over this past year for our existing funding members. And this gives you an idea. There's all different kinds of ways to get involved in the project. You guys have heard me say over and over again, you don't have to pay to be involved in Da Vinci, but we're definitely shifting to make it more inclusive, to allow more folks, other types of organizations to come into the project. And so I'm going to walk through some of the updates about membership, because we haven't done that in some time. So if you can flip forward to the next slide, just to remind people, when we think about funding Da Vinci, it's also meaning getting involved in the governance structure. And we've actually set up the project so really people can be actively involved in helping to set the priorities. So really the use cases are sort of run as autonomous units and fully formed teams that are fractionally funded, paid resources and in-kind resources increasingly from our membership. So members help run the use cases. Operating committee really sets the priorities, gives us direct feedback on a day-to-day basis as a PMO to make sure that we're working hand in hand. And then we have a steering committee that's representative of the potential of all the different stakeholders that are involved in the project. I like to think of them as archetypes. So when Kirk and Mike and Jessica are sitting on our Da Vinci steering committee, they're not sitting there as their own organization. They're sitting there to think about what is a payer doing, and then what is overall should Da Vinci be doing. People are playing really sort of their industry role on that conversation. And so we've really worked for that to be egalitarian, I would say, in a way. And then probably about 2 years into the project, we created a clinical advisory committee council, and they've been fantastic about giving us real world feedback, validating precepts around our use cases, challenging us maybe when we haven't been as thoughtful about having that provider sort of at the front of the mind in some of our use case work. And so that's how we're set up from a program perspective. And depending on the level of involvement and funding you have for the project, you get to participate in different levels of the project. So if you can flip to the next slide. Just a quick reminder, so folks that come in at the premier level, which is the highest level, get the ability to bring 2 partners into the project to actually sit in that operating committee level with them. And so many of our vendors and our payers actually sponsor at that level today. A principal really is where most of the vendors, providers, some of the provider members and a few of our payers sit. You'll get to bring 1 partner in there, and that both of those give you the ability to be able to participate on the steering committee, as well as be actively involved in the PMO and the running of the actual use cases. So many of our member leads from those organizations that run use cases are at that level. And then the sponsored members, as I was saying, you get to bring a partner in, they essentially have the same rights as a principal member, and they're sponsored. That's reserved for providers. And so often many of our provider partners will come in as an associate member to a principal or premier member. And then we have our partners, and that's for our smaller organizations and provider organizations that don't have as much access to capital. And there's a delineation, there's a chart. I generally sort of coach people sort of into the right level from a membership perspective, but we're being more and more aware of bringing smaller payers, smaller providers, and smaller providers, smaller payers, and smaller vendors into the project. So there's a link there if you want to learn more about getting involved in the project. And then contributors we reserve for providers. So providers that don't want to be affiliated but don't necessarily have capital to join the project are able to join at the contributor level. And that allows them, I would say, to get credit for being part of the project and have their logo and access to some of our membership meetings. If you want to flip forward, Alex. So if you want to know more about the work that we're doing there, feel free to reach out to the PMO. We'll typically have 1 or 2 conversations to let you know what does it really mean on a day-to-day basis to get involved in the program. I'm going to move us now to talk a little bit more about really what I'm hoping for is a lively discussion with our leadership team. I'm super excited by the crew that we have here. You heard Alex more formally introduce everybody at the beginning of the conversation. I think some of you saw through the chat, we had a little bit of trouble getting Kirk, so I'm going to put him in a little bit of the hot seat this morning now because he wasn't in our prep as we were getting ready. Hey, look at that, you're on screen, we're winning. So Kirk, if you could just kick us off and maybe just give some high level thoughts with your steering seat, sort of on where we've been so far this year, and then hit it back to me, and we'll get Derek, Hans, and Anna involved in the conversation. But we really want to, I think today's conversation really is about, like, there's a realness to the work that we're doing today, I think, that has moved from building stuff to implementing, and that's been one of our big goals over the last couple of years. And so it's the guy who's out in front doing a lot of the implementation work in addition to helping us run the Da Vinci Steering Committee. I'd love for you to maybe open us up with a couple thoughts, and then we'll kick off the discussion. Oh no, you're on mute if you're talking. So close.
So close. How about now?
You're good.
All right. Well, thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks, everyone. It's always great to be able to speak to this community at large, especially after hearing the recap of all the great work, all the impactful work that has been done by all of us together. So once again, I just want to thank everyone for this really unique opportunity. I think we're coming up on 6 years of Da Vinci, which is pretty mind-blowing that it's been that long. If you think back to 6 years ago, I mean, FHIR APIs were still new technology. And we were just coming off of some really exciting work from Project Argonaut, all about connecting EMR systems through FHIR APIs to consumers, to patients and consumer apps. And at that point, we looked at the progress that was being made there, at the challenge ahead of all of us as payers and providers, as the country's moving toward value-based care. And we committed ourselves really to build upon that foundation and to create an American healthcare system where data flows securely and predictably in an open standards way to enable those virtually integrated systems that could break down the silos that for so long been such a barrier to clinical outcomes, costs, and all of the other things that we're all very passionate about trying to address. And to think about how far we have come and the way that we've done it, I don't know if there was any other way that might have worked than what we've done, which is basically get payers and providers and the EMR vendors and other health IT companies to come together and not just talk about what should be happening or how we might solve this, but roll up our sleeves, participate in connect-a-thons, bring in our business partners to help inform their perspective on what we're trying to do, and produce real work, real capabilities, usher them through balloting and ballot reconciliation, and then finally get them into production where real patients and real providers and real payer employees are now feeling that the promise of that vision. So it's an honor to have been involved in this project. It's been the most satisfying thing I've done in my now very long career, and just really excited to have this conversation today with some of my cohorts to share some of the great work that's been happening most recently. So thanks everyone, as always.
Awesome, that's great. And if I can get everybody else to join us on screen and take yourselves off mute, that would be awesome. Awesome. Did we lose Hans? Hans, are you still out there?
Trying to get the video.
Okay, awesome, great. So I have to first say I am thankful for all of the people that are on screen right now and the organizations that they represent. I make sort of the comment, Hans, I think you get a little bit of feedback coming in. Can you guys hear the feedback, or am I the only one that can hear it?
I can hear it.
We're getting yeses.
I'm not noticing.
2 speakers maybe?
No, there's nothing else in the room going. So I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, it's gone now. Oh, maybe not. It could just be that I'm really loud and I echo. Why don't I have you mute for a second and see if it goes away, just to make sure it's come from you. Because there's never a dull moment today, like literally. Okay, we're good. Hans, I'm just going to ask you to be mindful about muting and unmuting. Maybe that will help us get through here. And so again, just really thankful, because I say the statement that it's a human powered effort, and that seems, I think, sort of trite and easily repeatable, but the ability to combine sort of some funded resources that are going to get paid on an hourly basis to get this work done with the hours that all of you and your organizations and the member organizations and the people out in the community spend to get real world feedback and real world testing done on these guides is remarkable. I mean, our ability to be able to progress, I think, at the rate and the speed that we've been able to is amazing. And so I would love to, and I'm going to pick on Kirk first, just to talk about, like, in the realist world kind of sense, what has it been like for you to get your teams involved in the building of the guides, the testing of the guides, and how it's affected your roadmaps. And if I think about this, like, what does it mean? Like, when I think about sort of outside the public conversations, what does it look like? What does Da Vinci look like today for you in your organizations and with your early partners?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, one of the things that I'm really excited about how we are structuring things and funding things and prioritizing things inside my company is, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, we used to put forth business cases with names like, you know, that interoperability in them. Maybe they would say something about Da Vinci. And we spent a lot of time and effort kind of bringing our business partners and some of our provider partners along to kind of help us sell the promise of this idea. We never invested a ton of money in it, frankly, but enough for us to get our own company and our own employees excited about the idea. Today, this is just one of the ways we solve problems. And so it's almost like Intel inside. A little shout out to Intel folks. It's Da Vinci inside. It's FHIR APIs inside. And what we're putting money into are the business problems that we're trying to solve for our members. How we're doing value-based care, how we're working on things like prior auth. And we've gotten to that point now where this is just another tool in the toolbox for us to solve those problems. And the other thing that's happening is we're starting to really impress / surprise / really, are you sure our business people, when we show them how, okay, having done this thing that we've done, the lift for us to now do this other thing, which might to someone who's not that familiar with FHIR feel like a completely different type of problem, but it's much less, right? Because there is that value of reuse. And so that means the costs that we are now bringing forward as the level of effort for us to do the next thing using FHIR APIs is lower than what is expected. That's great. That means we're getting a better ROI. And so, I mean, I had a moment just a month ago. Our CEO was, you know, doing the all hands call, and Da Vinci shows up. I had no idea this was going to happen. Da Vinci shows up in a slide as a 2022 achievement and focus area. And that's coming a long way from just a few years ago, honestly.
Anna, can you talk a little bit about the actual operational impact that getting this work done inside MCC is actually having?
Yeah, and I'm going to giggle because the same thing happened on our all leaders call. This slide shows up. Oh, we're doing prior auth with Da Vinci. Oh, okay. Yeah, we are. So getting this started, and I think we started in the same way as Kirk described as providers, as knowing that it was the right thing to do. Like, yes, a one-to-many solution makes sense, and we can do this. This isn't rocket science. This is basic, just coding, you know, and speaking in the same languages. So I had people willing to. I've been in the organization for a while and had people who are willing to kind of trust along the way, and let's just kind of figure this out and build that momentum. And what really turned the dial for executing inside our health system was showing this. We submitted this to what we call President's Awards, which are internal awards we give to specific groups. And this Da Vinci IG for DEQM for the Med Reconciliation Measure won that award out of 100 and something submissions, and technology never wins that award. And the reason why they told us we won was because we did something that didn't have to touch the provider workflow. It was a pure technology solution. We didn't even have to ask them a use case scenario because we didn't have to touch that. So they thought it was really powerful that that type of solution exists, and that we only have to do it once and we can do it for everyone. So that momentum really brought us to a place where we could fund more actions within the organization, and also start building ideas out on where are the low-hanging fruits to make more proof of concepts to prove it out even more, because one is an N of one, and that's what it is. So we continued to work off the side of our desk, and now I will say it's pretty much a full-time team that works on FHIR right now inside of our organization. We have an FHIR architect who learned alongside me. We didn't even know what FHIR was together, but now we know. So it was really bringing the momentum together and having a partner willing to dance and create a team of teams like with Regents. And also our vendor Epic, because we can't do this without all the technologies involved in what we're doing. So it's really that internal momentum to build the culture of this team that understands new technology, and then bringing that culture out into the partnership. And I really feel like that's how Da Vinci has been brought into our organization, is it's opened this door to a safe space where we can have hard conversations about doing things the right, what is the right thing to do.
So I'm going to flip to Hans, because I know he's going to turn into a pumpkin on us at 5 o'clock, and maybe ask you to talk a little bit, Hans, not just about sort of the Da Vinci impact workflow wise, but just, with the year-end requirements around FHIR APIs, where as a vendor, Hans and Kirk and Anna are out ahead of everybody, right? They're early adopters. What this means for you guys from a roadmap progress perspective, sort of the realness of FHIR from an infrastructure perspective, maybe than a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if you go beyond Da Vinci, then the realness is clearly there. And want to tie back to some of the comments that Anna and Kirk made, is that as you're building out a FHIR infrastructure, you're starting to reuse at a variety of levels. You're doing it at the infrastructure level, because you can start to use it for a variety of different purposes. But also that when you look at the data, today it's not uncommon that data flies through HL7 version 2 and through CCDA and through X12 and through NCPDP, etc. You start to see is that where the data is actually for different purposes flowing through a FHIR expression, there's more consistency, there's more reuse of the data itself in a way that you don't need to translate as much. Now, there's still translation steps, and it still will happen for a while. But that's the kind of value that you're going to build on as well. So when we're looking at it, is that as we're building our infrastructure, we have more available than what certification currently calls for, because of what's out there, and that's constantly growing. And that's where you then also have the opportunity that on the one hand, you would like to integrate some of these capabilities directly already into your applications. On the other hand, I have now FHIR APIs available that others can begin to take advantage of as well. So where it's the example that Kirk has with MCG and other payers that have built their app that can sit on top of these APIs, we can already make a start in that place in that way as well. So the reuse ability to do that at the granular level, at the workflow level, now at the bulk data level, etc. You have more tools available that can consistently share the same data many different ways. So I think that's the power of where we're getting. Still a long way to go. But that's, I think, what you start to see recognized in roadmaps. And you might not see everybody invest in the same place, but they all effectively are doing the same way. They're building up their infrastructure to take advantage of it as they see their clients' needs ask for particular capabilities now or tomorrow or whenever.
Hans, I'm gonna pause that for 1 second, because I think that's a really important place for us to go. And maybe Derek, have you talk a little bit about sort of the impact of FHIR in the Da Vinci roadmap and the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis? I know you're not involved in the work out on the West Coast, and other colleagues of yours are sort of, following alongside and helping, do the customizations for the MCC and the Regents team and a couple of the other providers that are out in that market. But if you can maybe talk a little bit about sort of I feel like this year with both, with all of our EHR members, previous to any other year, that we're really getting traction with the Da Vinci APIs, with the EHRs and their roadmaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, again, congratulate Kirk and Anna on their success with what they have built today. And really what those early adopters do, especially when they're using some of those building blocks, like Hans has said, a lot of what we're doing is building these building blocks, building this infrastructure to build on top of, get that reuse. But a lot of what like Anna's team and Kirk's team is doing is even pushing us as EMR companies to say, all right, we can standardize that more. We can bring that to the next level. We can integrate that more into the workflow, so we don't just have an API. We get that data into the right spot in the workflow. We drive the right workflows. We prevent this burden from someone needing to click the button. And that's where Da Vinci has really been driving a lot of those discussions, is going past kind of this first wave to say, now partnering with folks like Epic, folks like Cerner, to go that step further to say, it's not just the API, how do we integrate it directly into these workflows to take it to the next level? And I mean, we're happy to say, like, we have multiple teams in multiple different work groups and use cases in Da Vinci. And what's been really cool at Epic is they're not just from one team. They're not just from, our health plans team that I help manage, but they're from our referrals and authorizations team working on some of our prior auth stuff. It's from our population health teams working on some of the value-based data exchanges. It's from our revenue and access teams working on the estimates functionality for price transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the scope at which we've started to integrate Da Vinci, this payer-provider collaboration work, into all of the teams at Epic, and really have that drive our future roadmap as well. Because to be honest, and Kirk, you brought this up before, like where we were 2-3 years ago, probably more like 4 or 5 years ago, we knew the problems that existed. And we knew we wanted to solve them, but in order to truly solve them, they need to be payer agnostic and they need to be EMR agnostic for scalability to even happen. And what Da Vinci has done to help drive that work has been incredible, and we're happy to be here and help drive that in the industry.
Maybe before we talk about sort of that impact of the APIs, and Derek, that was great. Maybe Kirk and Anna and Hans, if I can get you guys to expound a little bit. I know each of your organizations has really been looking at the clinical data exchange, sort of the promise that's coming out of the work that we're doing around clinical data exchange. Hans, maybe because I know you're going to have to jump off, maybe if you can talk a little bit about sort of, where we've gotten to with CDEX and why we think, we're going to be able to get to more of that sheer automation. I think that both Derek and Anna were talking about sort of that touchless, promise, right? That we can make sure that we can deliver that, but also with, respect and security and the ability, for payers and provider partners to know that they're really sort of living and breathing that, minimum necessary protection of our patient data.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. CDEX has a lot of opportunity, but it's also a little bit challenged by what data can I actually share, holding people back from going there. Because CDEX has that opportunity to say, well, I can if you have a good relationship between two parties, whomever they are, the FHIR APIs can start to be used, and you're pretty close to being able to deploy CDEX. But there is still this challenge of, but what data set for what purpose? And I think it's a little bit of a challenge that on the one hand, CDEX is well positioned to help in these exchanges to move that forward. And it's interesting to see outside of Da Vinci that CDEX is frequently being referenced as, hey, if you need to have more underlying data, then here's a place to go. Please look at that so that it's as consistent as possible. But where you start to run into some adoption challenges is that what data? How do I agree to the data that you can have that automated access to, and depending on where you are, it still might make sense to have a facilitated manual workflow to gather the data, okay, But the intent is to start to minimize that, whether it's for prior authorization, whether it is for other augmentary data. If it's for in public health, you can start to look at that additional data for surveillance that you didn't get from your case report. Looks awfully similar to a CDEX request to get that data from the appropriate sources. So that pattern is there. But I think it is the major area that we need to focus on to move forward is that can we easily agree to what data is being agreed to beyond the individual sites that can figure that out, and that's all fine. But how can you do that at a scalable level so that if I am one payer and I'm going to ask 10 different providers for information, I don't need to repeat that process. I'm not going to go to public health outside Da Vinci. If I am public health, I don't need to redefine that method 10 different times. I think that's where the opportunity is, but we have a little bit of ways to go to get there because of the who can use what data when. But it's minimum necessary, whether it's fit for purpose, name your term. That's what I think it's really all about, why you don't see it as far along as that it otherwise could be.
So I had, Leslie's going to drop a link in. This past year, our Clinical Advisory Council actually did a great job of updating our operating principles. That is a document we embed in all of our guides for folks that maybe don't live and breathe sort of HIPAA or a lot of the concepts I think that Hans just unpacked to really get to this sort of multi-payer, multi-provider, minimum use, really being respectful of how things work. We did a refresh of that this year, and the steering and the operating committee approved it. So Leslie's going to drop the link to that in the chat if she hasn't already, that it's worth a read through, and it starts to tackle, I think, some of the concepts that Hans is talking about. But, Kirk and Anna, you guys, you've worked this out, you've figured out sort of where your value is here. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe a little bit of a response on Hans's commentary about, this, how do we get people to allow the clinical data to flow that candidly is already flowing, right, in the form of PDFs and CCDAs and faxes more freely, but still respect sort of the agita, I would say, that still exists in the digital sharing of that data versus maybe the more locked in formats that we shared in today.
Sure, and I can start, Anna, and please jump in. I think, I get that general question a lot, or that general concern, I guess, when we're talking about, hey, here's a better way for us to share data between payers and providers. And sometimes we talk about one of the reasons it's better is these are open APIs. And I can understand how some people, when they hear that term open API, it just sounds like a Wild West of access, et cetera. That's on us for the way we talk about what Da Vinci and FHIR is and isn't. But I think one of the things that I always like to do when we are sitting down and we're trying to bring FHIR APIs to a problem space is ask the question, what data goes back and forth today and in what ways? And the answer is usually tons of data and in tons of different ways, right? Yeah. So when we think about, how are we doing a good job at scale in applying minimum necessary and authorized use only on those faxes that come over, or the spreadsheets that come over, or, and this is a real thing, and as someone who spent most of my year in cybersecurity, most of my career in cybersecurity, just about gave me a heart attack when I first learned of it. Very common practice of providers just say, look, payers, here's a username and password to our EMR. We don't know what you want. It's a pain in the butt to get it to you, so just come on in and get it, right? By moving to a standardized way, especially one that is leveraging all of the capabilities that come with APIs that people have figured out over the course of doing distributed business processes over the internet and other industries, and to be able to now have a single place where we can focus our energies on making sure we are getting the security right, the authorization right, et cetera, together with the federal government. I mean, we can't underestimate their role in this, in helping us be able to not have 50 different ways of trying to do something, and to be able to bring the whole country onto a single way. It doesn't mean there aren't issues and challenges that we need to figure out, but by just having that focus and that that understanding that when we solve this with payer 1 or provider 2, that it's not just a one-off ad hoc approach and we will start over again with the next one, just makes it much more solvable of a problem.
Hey, before Anna goes, I'm going to ask, oh, I was going to see if we could get a last comment from Hans, but he's gone.
I'm still here. I was easing my way quietly out, but
I was just going to ask you before you take off, do you actually have sort of a takeaway or a call to action for folks with your Cerner hat on to say, this is what I really need folks that are listening today to do?
I think it's what we have all been doing and need to continue to do, maintain that engagement, maintain that working on it. It will be in some areas will be slow moving, in other areas will be fast moving based on the parties that can come together. But this is the work that we have to do to get everybody on the same page and get them moving forward. So keep on participating and contributing to the development, the deployment, the use of these guys, because they only can make it better. Not everybody's in the same spot, and that's understandable. That's where we are, but that doesn't mean that that's not valued to participate where you can. So that would be my call for continued action.
Thanks, Hans.
Thanks, Hans. Thanks for hanging in there. So Anna, can you talk a little bit about sort of this, sort of data sharing conundrum, but maybe also think about it as in the terms of what are some of the ahas that maybe have come out in your organization as you guys, you shared earlier, sort of the touchless, we didn't affect anything around the provider that have come out of sort of the move, the warring between that, open access to making sure everything's locked down and being used correctly.
Yeah, I've started to change my language to standard access to data, standard APIs. That's what we're really talking about here. When I went through the go to the Cambia experience with prior authorizations and how they get done today, and saw what the same thing Kirk saw, how much data is being shared that is not relevant to that particular case, but because of covered entity, it's safe and we're doing our best. However, we do need to do better. And we all know we can do better for our patients and our members. And this, to me, was a solution that solved for that. And the only way we get there is to do it together and have more people a part of this community and more people at the table. And as I think about it as a provider, what do I do with this data conundrum? Well, I don't even want to be talking about data. Like, it should just be this thing. It's money in my wallet, right? And it's healthcare in my wallet is what it is. And I deserve it as a human, as do every single 78 of you on the attendee list today. You deserve it. You deserve healthcare, and we shouldn't be hoarding data. This is my hand warmer. Hoarding data, because it's essentially hoarding healthcare for our patients and members, and they should be able to have that choice in their lives. And I feel like this type of solution is something that would solve for that. And so that's why we're making the investments, because we want to protect our patients' data and we want to enable our organization to have that one-to-many solution that Hans and Derek alluded to.
Yeah,
can I add one thing on the scalability aspect? I think Hans hit on a lot of them, but one of the things, and again, I'm from the development side, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit here. Ryan Bohochik gave me permission to. But one of the things that I know we've been working on in care quality and TEFCA work groups for payment and operations is a lot of this stuff to really bring it to be scalable. I think one of the things we need to be able to solve as an industry, and probably Da Vinci impacts this quite a bit, especially with CDEX, is in order to truly get to a scalable solution where a request can come in for clinical data for a member, for that patient, and automatically respond to that with the trust that the provider system needs to say, yes, they were actually covered for this encounter by this payer who's requesting, I think we need to get a step further in establishing almost a real directory of payer identifiers to get to the spot where we can actually have that national directory of payers, so that even third parties, whether it be someone who's doing work on behalf of a payer for risk adjustment, could request on behalf of a payer. Until we get to that spot, and I know Care Quality is building a directory, and TEFCA is working on a concept of directory as well. But until a health system can then set up this confidence layer where they can map their records, because they build out their own records for, this is my representation of this health plan in their system. If they can't make that marriage between this is who's requesting and this is the coverage that this person has, it's going to be a manual process until we can establish that. Unless we do these point-to-point connections, it's not going to scale. So I think that's a challenge. I know I work on the work group for TEFCA, and that's something we're working through. But I think that's something that we'll continue to have to look at to actually get to this true scalability across the industry.
Yeah, well. And I'll point folks, if you're not already on the listserv for Da Vinci, we will be sending the draft commentary that's coming out of FAST with input from folks that are involved in many of the same activities, like Derek and Hans and our payer and provider community. The draft commentary that's coming out of FAST, I think that's really amplifying the need and the role and the data elements that really are needed to be able to do that automation, Derek, that you're describing. Yeah. And I think that it's been really fantastic, I think, over the last year. And I'm gonna maybe talk a little bit more than I normally would facilitating, because my team helps support the FAST initiative as well, is the ability for FAST to roll out of ONC as sort of a government funded conversation and a bunch of volunteers to actually becoming a full-fledged accelerator this year and starting to get those initial implementation guides written so folks can pick them up and use them and figure out how we can really focus on that sort of convergence of how are we going to scale beyond these early adopters that are doing a lot of point-to-point work, acknowledging this ability for people to be able to self-discover endpoints is going to be critically important for us to allow you guys to really get the throughput right of your investment in the industry. Mm-hmm. And Kirk, I know you had go ahead.
Well, to tee off of what you were saying, Jocelyn and Derek, get that adoption, Jocelyn and Derek, getting all the right data elements. The power that I've experienced, which was yesterday, this happened. I had a provider approach us and their EMR and say, hey, we want to give you some of our data because you need it as a part of your quality measure. And I'm speaking to diabetic retinopathy measure. We want to get you those results and we want to get them into your EMR. And I immediately can say, yeah, we could do that, because I know that the API, we can Epic has standard APIs. It has a recipe that we could create for that measure. If we utilize the IG under Da Vinci, we'll have a standard conversation like we already have with MRP, but just with a different quality measure. So it's really powerful. I don't think I could have said yes. I would have said, oh my gosh, that's going to take us like a year to figure out all that and map everything and make sure it's all right. No, I could just say yes, and actually we could probably be live with something like that in 4 to 6 weeks, which is really powerful for the patient because they're getting the right care at the right time. And those who aren't getting the care, that gives them access because we're not repeating things over in the health system.
Anna, I've heard you make that point before, which is that idea of if you're collecting the data correctly the first time in an automated way, when you actually go to make that nurse phone call, it's actually to somebody that needs the care. I think that is such an incredibly powerful point for us to make. Well, I want to be mindful of time. I've got one more question I want to ask you guys before we sort of dive into your lightning round of what are you going to ask the audience to do for you? I think that, if you think about everything that you've done over the last couple of years, as you think about sort of your participation from your organization, what have your ahas been? What's missing what should we be doing that we're not doing, or what were the things you wish you had figured out earlier in your process, because we know we haven't gotten it all right. And I'm going to go to Anna first.
What is the weakness, huh? Well, let's just talk about prior auth for a second. We weren't thinking about coverage, double coverage, triple active coverage. Like, oh, that's going to be a problem. So it's not perfect, and I go into talks and conversations with people saying that, like, not all the data elements are there. FHIR concatenates first name. That's really annoying in the United States. So every system doesn't concatenate it, right? So we will always have opportunities to get better, but this is such a leap forward from where we have been. It just feels like a bigger leap than I've experienced before in healthcare, and I've not that long, 15 years, but long enough to feel like we slugged along there for a while and didn't have any like exponential changes. And now having this opportunity and having the collaboration, people are making the choice to come to the table and act as a team to solve a problem instead of a competitor. I think that is what's really creating this new space where we're making these exponential leaps forward. So it's not perfect. Not all the data elements are there. Not all of them are in the right kind of structure we might need to make those types of exchanges, but it is a leap forward to a better solution than we have today.
Kirk, from the Cambia side.
Well, maybe I'll answer Cambia / Da Vinci a little bit. I think one of the things that is becoming more and more apparent to us, but maybe wasn't at the very beginning, was how what we call Da Vinci use cases, the interconnectedness of them, the relationships of them, and how this one plus this one plus this one solves your real business problem of data exchange for quality measures. It was just kind of a long list, a long menu. And I know Jocelyn, we're working on that, on how to structure that. I think if I could step outside.
I interject because it's not just Da Vinci guys, it's really all of the different FHIR APIs that take you to get to a whole solution, right? We need to spend more time doing that. I agree.
Yep, and then inside Cambia, I wish we had kind of painted that picture a little better. I still think we can paint it a little better internally. At a national level, not that any of us had a lot of control over this, but we have spent a lot on patient access API, and in many ways, if you look at how the federal government has kind of leaned into interoperability through its mandate power, I think in hindsight, I wish the first mandate was a B2B payer to provider thing versus here's a thing for patients and consumer apps to come connect to. We love that idea. We love that concept. We want to be free and transparent about our members' data. But the demand signal for the B2B stuff, as we've seen in Da Vinci, is through the roof, because we got payers and providers who are both struggling and wasting money and eager to improve upon it, right? We see this just in our membership and how we've continued to grow and grow and grow. And I still, every once in a while, I will bump up against internally that the concept of interoperability and FHIR APIs, in my experience, it's taken a little bit of a black eye from the fact that a lot of payers had to spend all their budgets on these patient access APIs, and they're not getting used, right? If that money had gone toward CDEX, prior auth, DEQM, PDEX, we'd be so much further ahead than where we are.
Yeah, I do feel like there's a big onion layer here, right, that we are unwrapping as we're learning how to do this work together as a community. I think that you're spot on. And I think that the pended rule that got pulled back, I think if that had gone straight into effect, we would be having a very different conversation today than this sort of stasis that we've been in. But Derek, you're in a different seat, right? You've got you've got the ONC 21st Century Cures rules. You've had a full plate of FHIR requirements, right, for the last few years. I'm interested almost as a counterpoint, because I agree with everything Kirk just said, but where you guys think that from a EHR perspective, you could have done something better, or what more could we be doing to support, the folks that are on the vendor side of the community in contrast, right? While the rest of us have been sitting out here sort of with bated breath, waiting for the alignment we get out of the rules.
Yeah, and it's tough because as developers, we never really want the regulatory considerations and pressures to be what drives our development roadmaps all the time. But in reality, especially the last few years, given some of the considerations you brought up, the specific regulations you brought up, whether it be the ones you mentioned, even some of the cost transparency, machine readable files, all these different regulations that were dropped, and then a lot of them have short time frames on them, to be honest. That's where a lot of our development goes. And of course, we are, as a EHR company, we are driving for the success of our customers. And what's unique now is a lot of times you look historically at Epic and it's like, well, it's the large hospitals, the clinics, but we have large health plans that are on Epic as well now as well. Some of the largest health plans in the country use Epic, not necessarily to meet all their regulatory needs, but all of these weights play into what our roadmap is. Regulatory, maybe not sadly, but it has taken a lot of our work in the past few years for sure. We're also very tied into what is pended, what is coming up, responding to RFIs, and then also responding to wherever our customers are needing us to go. So I guess if we are if you're one of our groups that use Epic, and Anna for sure as well, tell us your priorities. We'd love to listen. We love to respond to our customers, and of course help you through any of the regulatory needs as well. But we are definitely innovating in some of the health plan and payment and operations space, payer-provider collaboration space. We've invested a huge amount into it. We've created a whole new team to focus on it as well. It's grown quite a bit over the last few years, along with Da Vinci. So it's going to be exciting in the next few years to see where we get to with all this work.
So I would pull out a theme from today's conversations that honestly I didn't expect when we were prepping for our session, which is something that we've seen, and Alex and I have spent a lot of time talking about this year, which is, I think where we started the project 3.5, 4 years ago, really in earnest, doing onboarding and bringing people into the community. In a lot of cases, we had sort of single champions, right? We had Dave DeGandhi from the Cambia team. We had Anna from the MCC team. I could name individuals, a lot of our champions. What we're seeing this year, and I think all of you described, is there are people whose day job is to solve a business problem, and they're now incorporating Da Vinci into the way that they're getting their job done, which I think is, I think such an important turning point for us from a program perspective. And I'm super excited to see about, sort of what's going to be coming out of the pipe as we get into next year. So I'm going to be mindful that I do want to make sure we have a few minutes to ask a couple of questions. So let's do a quick round robin. So if you've got what I asked Hans, if you've got a takeaway, a call to action that you want folks that are sitting on the call with us to bring back into their organizations or to internalize, what is it? And I will start with Anna, and we'll move to Derek and then go to Kirk.
Awesome, thanks, Jocelyn. The one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately was a question that was asked of me from a colleague about, can we replicate the relationship we have with Regents, this building things together and trying things together with others? Can it be replicated? Could we actually do this? And the answer is yes. because it's a choice to come to the table and come to the table as equals, equitable, you know, not negotiating payer rates or how this value-based contract's going to go. It's coming to the table to solve a problem for patients and members that will ultimately put more resources on a healthcare side into the patient. And on Derek's side as a vendor, it puts more resources towards what's important to the patient and the providers in this situation. And from Kirk, he benefits the same way as well. We all benefit from this. So that's why I say that can be replicated. That relationship can be replicated 100%. And pick up the phone and call me. We'll do something tomorrow if you want to do that. But I really want to leave this year, 2023, with the hope that the momentum is there and life is an occasion and we're all going to rise to it. And this is one of those things that we need to rise to for our patients in our communities, because it's really going to make a difference in that vision we all have for our personal health, that if I show up somewhere, the same stuff is in the other place, because it should be. It's digital already. Why can't Fitbit put my data into Apple's open API? Because they have a proprietary API. So let's do this for our people. And I really appreciate that space Da Vinci has created, because that's why it's really going to be able to be replicated, because it gives us a space and an opportunity to do that, a formal structure. You know, it's hard to schedule meetings, it's hard to do these things. So it's show up. That's all I have to say, and we'll be there.
And to underpoint that, the community aspect, that to have those hard conversations and the sometimes may seem like arguments, but really getting to the nut of what an issue is so that we can get to the next place. And having I don't want to say a safe space, because sometimes it's a little bit rough, but being able to work those things out sort of as a community, I think has been really important. So Derek, what do you got?
Yeah, and I think it'll be a lot of the same themes, as probably no one's surprised, but like the work that Da Vinci is doing, this work between having true collaboration between health plans and health systems is, I'm going to say, essential for where healthcare needs to go. Like, it truly needs to happen in order to solve all these problems, not only just member experience, patient experience, administrative burden, of course, the price of healthcare. There's so much waste in healthcare that could be solved by this. It's insane. I'm lucky every day I wake up and I get to come to work and work on this type of stuff. I brag to my wife at least once a week that I don't think I could be anywhere else in the world and have an impact on healthcare, the cost of healthcare, or anywhere else in the world. So I love my job, and she gets annoyed at me sometimes because of that. But I love what we're doing. I would say keep doing it. The one thing I would say is trust in these relationships is key. We need to be able to trust that the health plan and the health system and the vendor that's involved with this, we're all coming into this to actually better healthcare. And if one side comes into the relationship and, you know, we're working on these projects together and they think the other side is going to have way more out of this than the other side, they're probably not going to move forward. So it has to be a truly bi-directional exchange of value and information, not only for those parties, but also the member always has to be kept in mind as well. So that's what I would say.
Wrap us up, Kirk.
Sure. Yeah, I think you know, it comes back to the uniquely challenging problem that we're all trying to work on together. We're trying to reinvent how healthcare works from a technology perspective, when there are all these different players that have to be on the same page to make that transformation. These are players that have never historically been on the same page as technology providers in the past. And I think about the task of people like Alex Muggy at CMS or Mickey Tripathi at ONC to try to regulate our way to that future state. There's no way they could be successful if that was the only way the country was going about this. We could not just regulate our way to that vision of secure, scalable, API-driven healthcare. On the other hand, if we did not have the federal government's partnership and support and stick, frankly, we also would never get there. There's too many entrenched interests, too many business models, too much cheese is being moved here for us to let the free market take us to where we need to be. And if that wasn't the case, we would already be there. But we're wasting $30 to $50 billion a year in this country simply in inefficient ways that data is moving between all of us. What's amazing about Da Vinci, and I echo Derek's comment there about feeling like you really are making an impact. This is no exaggeration. We in Da Vinci, this community, is essential to doing this. Imagine being inside in Derek's shoes or another EMR person's shoes, and you're trying to build technology that's going to work not just for your core historical customer base, but also it's going to work for some payer out there that you have no contractual relationship with. Payers are complex. There's a lot of legacy stuff happening. There's a lot of business process, a lot of humans. It's like we're a community of free alpha testers who are deep experts, who are informing the roadmap for federal regulation so that when they pass a law or a requirement, they can at least say, well, we know a handful of payers and providers worked on this and tweaked it and put it in production and improved it, et cetera, because there's this thing called Da Vinci that made it happen. And so they can confidently point to that and say, everybody do this. So if you are out there and like Derek, you want to feel like, man, I want to make an outsized difference that really impacts the American healthcare system, this is about as good of an opportunity you're going to get, unless you're going to run a federal agency, is to actually join that alpha test community. And you're informing that roadmap for Epic, and you're informing that regulation for the whole country as you do it. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you. I'm so thankful for all of you guys and Hans for today, for the conversation, the realness, I think, in which you approach this. I think to echo and maybe nudge Kirk's commentary a little bit, I think this idea of we're enabling this work to happen, not just informing that it's that it's real. And I think that's incredibly important. If you want to learn more about getting involved, drop an email to the PMO. Go and check Confluence. There's tons of resources out there for you to get involved. As you can see, there are willing partners for everyone to work with. There is no shortage, I think, of willing hands in this community to help onboard you to getting started. I'm so thankful. I love listening to Derek talk, because I think we're all doing this mission-driven work because we know that it has to happen in order for us to progress as an industry in a meaningful way. So thankful for you guys. Happy holidays to everybody. Have a great new year. And we will see you in January with your regularly scheduled member forum for our members, and back to community roundtables towards the end of January. We're starting to plan them next week. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the year. Thanks, guys.